Luke writes, Luke chapter 15, verses 1 and 2, and 11 through 32. All the tax collectors and sinners were gathering around Jesus to listen to him. The Pharisees and legal experts were grumbling, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus said, "A certain man had 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the inheritance.' Then the father divided his estate between them. Soon afterward, the younger son gathered everything together and took a trip to a land far away. There he wasted his wealth through extravagant living. When he had used up his resources, a severe food shortage arose in that country, and he began to be in need. He hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. He longed to eat his fill from what the pigs ate, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have more than enough food, and I'm starving to death? I will get up and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Take me on as one of your hired hands.' So he got up and went to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him, and he was moved with compassion. His father ran to him, hugged him, and kissed him. Then his son said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and bring some sandals. Quick, fetch the fatted calf and slaughter it. We must celebrate with feasting, because the son of mine who was dead has come back to life. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. Coming in from the field, he approached the house and heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what was going on. The servant replied, 'Your younger brother has arrived, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf, because he received his son back safe and sound.' Then the older son was furious and didn't want to enter in. But his father came out and begged him. He answered his father, 'Look, I've served you all these years, and I never disobeyed your instruction. Yet you've never given me as much as a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours returned, after gobbling up your estate on prostitutes, you slaughtered the fattened calf for him.' Then the father said, 'Son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive. He was lost and he has been found. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. A man had 2 sons. With those words, Jesus begins what many think his most familiar, and some have even called the greatest story in all of literature. I would have loved to have been there to have heard Jesus tell this parable. But this parable is very dangerous, because this is one of those stories, and Luke is full of these stories. Luke's gospel, and Luke has this way of drawing you in to where you love a passage, and then you start to study about what that passage really means, and oh, wow, I didn't realize that. That's what this story will do to us if we really understand it. A man had 2 sons. The younger son went to his father and said, "Father, I want my share of the inheritance." Now, I don't think there are words to describe how inappropriate that was in this culture. I mean, let's be honest, that would be inappropriate in any culture. I mean, if one of your children came to you and said, "Hey, I want my inheritance now," you would probably make it where they didn't even get their inheritance then. In effect, what this young fellow is saying to his father, "I'm tired of waiting. I wish you were dead." And that's what he goes to his father and says. Why did the father do what he did? Why didn't he say, "Son, your inheritance will come soon enough, but you're going to have to wait"? Why didn't he say, "Son, you're not ready for that amount of money"? Maybe he did. Who's to say this was the first time this young man had been to his father with this request? In fact, I have a sneaky suspicion this young man had been to his father time after time after time, and eventually his father was just worn down. So the father in this story does what every parent has to do eventually. If you're a parent, you know what this father is feeling like. You know what it's like to watch your child make a decision you know they are going to live to regret. But you know there's no way you can stop, and you've got to eventually do what this father does. Open your hands and let him go. That's exactly what this father does. The translation I read from said he divided his estate. When you go back and look at the original Greek there, you could translate it, he divided his life. That tells me that a part of this father died when he divided his belongings between his 2 sons. We don't know how long it was before the younger son decided he was homesick. Not homesick like we normally think of it, but sick of home. Sick of the rules. Sick of the overprotective father. Sick of the older, overbearing brother. Wanting to be on his own. But pretty soon he packs up all his belongings and he takes a trip. Now he leaves with a lot of money and very little maturity. A lot of money and very little maturity. I don't have to tell you that is one deadly combination. He goes to, we're not told where exactly, a distant country, a far country, a foreign country. Different translations say. What we do know is that he goes to a Gentile territory. We know that because some pigs are going to show up later in the story, and that would not have happened if he was in a Jewish country. But he has himself a good time. He really does. He's got money. And I have a feeling he had a swagger in his step. I have a feeling he was dressed, like he was something, because he thought he was something. And he would go to these places, he would open his wallet, and he had this wad of cash, and people were looking at it. So everybody wanted to be his friend. He was paying. And he would reach in his wallet, and he would pay for this, and he would pay for that. And we don't know how long it was, but pretty soon he opened his wallet and it looked like mine. There was nothing in it. And to make matters worse, then a severe famine hit that country. And I have to believe, this is me imagining the scene, but I have to believe there came a time when this young man opened his wallet. He saw that there was nothing in it, and it scared him to death. He was in a strange country with no friends, no family, and no money. He does find a job. He finds a job working on a farm, feeding the pigs. And the text doesn't specifically say it, but I have a feeling that if nobody was looking, he was so hungry and he was so destitute, I have a feeling he got him a handful of what he was feeding those pigs. And I can only imagine what he looked like. Unshaven, beard down to here, hair stringy and dirty, clothes becoming ratty, no shoes. Can you imagine what he smelled like? He has no money. He's hanging out with the pigs. And one day he looked around and he says, wow, I never thought I'd be living like this. I never thought things would turn out like this. I am in one big mess. I don't know how far I can go before I am at rock bottom. I must be there already. I'm starving. I have nothing. I have no one. And I don't know what to do. I love it when Jesus says, and he came to himself. For the first time, I think he began to think about home. For the first time, I think, in a long time, he began to think about his Father. And he says to himself, how many of my Father's servants have food to spare? And I'm starving to death. I want you to notice what he says because it's important. He does not say, I'm going to go home. That is not what he says. He says, I'm going to my Father. He is putting all of his eggs in one basket. He is banking everything on the hope that if he arrives back at his home, he will find his Father's arms wide open. I imagine he walked the whole way with his head down. I imagine there was butterflies in his stomach because he doesn't know how the story is going to turn out. He has a little speech rehearsed. And as he walks home, he thinks, I never thought this would happen to me. He has no money. He has no excuses. And he has no idea how much his father missed him. He has no idea how many times at night his father would just pass by his room and look in and with a broken heart pray to God that one day his son will once again be in that room. He has no idea how many times his father would go out to the porch to look, hoping that he might get a glimpse of his son coming back. He has no idea the love that his father has for him. But as he gets close to home, I can imagine him over and over in his head repeating the speech he's going to give. He says, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you, and I no longer am worthy to be called your son. And he's going through all of that in his mind, and all of a sudden he looks up, and to his surprise, here comes his father, and his father is doing something that no Jewish man would do. No Jewish man would run. That was undignified. In fact, the Jewish men, they wore these long robes, and if you were to run, you would have to kind of, those of you who wear dresses, you know, if you're going to run, you got to kind of pick the dress up a little bit so you don't end up on the ground. But his father is running. His father is running as fast as he can. And his father doesn't care what he looks like. His father doesn't care what he smells like. His father doesn't care where he's been, what he's done. The only thing that matters to his father is that his son is home. And if you never hear another word I ever say, listen and listen closely. It doesn't matter where you've been. It doesn't matter what you've done, what you've said. It doesn't matter how far you have fallen, how bad you smell, how dirty you feel, or how dirty you are. God has never stopped loving you, and God will never stop loving you. And if you will come to your senses, you will find that there is, now and always will be, a Father who will receive you, who will love you, and who will make sure that you have a place. The Father loved his son when he was at home. The Father loved his son when he was in the far country. And the Father still loved his son when he came back home. And the father yells, quick, get the family ring. Bring a robe. Bring some sandals. You know, the mother is never mentioned in this story, but somebody had to kill the fatted calf and make the feast. I assume it was her. I can hear him say, Mom, kill that calf. Start cooking, put them biscuits in the oven. We're going to celebrate. And they began to dance. And they began to be joyous. And if this were a Hallmark movie, the credits would come. And everybody would live happy ever after. You ever listen to a sermon? And it was a good sermon. And the preacher got to a point, and I'm not talking about this sermon, okay? And the preacher got to the point where you were sitting there listening and you said, now that'd be a good place to stop. It would just be, that's the perfect place to stop. You've made a good message. Let's go home. With all of my heart, I wish Jesus had stopped the story right here. we could sing Amazing Grace and we could go home and we could celebrate. But how did Jesus start the story? A man had 2 sons. Well, the father's in there celebrating. The younger son is in there celebrating. Everybody's dancing. And the older son, he's been in the field. And he's hot. And he's tired. And he's hungry. And he's dirty. And as he nears the house, he hears music. I think he smelled the biscuits. I think he smelled the fatted calf. And he says, what is going on here? And one of the servants says, your younger brother has returned, and your father has thrown a big party for him. You know, Jesus does not say how the father realizes the older son is outside. I think the father heard the older son do what? A party for him? And the father, I think, hears it and comes out. And his other son, the other prodigal, says, now look, I can see me saying this. Now look, I've stayed here, I have worked, I have been a slave. And not once did I get even a little goat. And notice he does not say my brother. You know what he says? That son of yours. He squanders all of his money on prostitutes and extravagant living. And you have the audacity to kill a fatted calf and to celebrate. And the father says, son, everything I've got's yours. You're always going to be with me. And if you'll notice in the passage twice the father says, this son of mine was dead, but now he's alive. I get the feeling that the father thought he would never see this younger son alive again. So, son, we've got to celebrate. And I keep on wanting to finish the story. And I look for verse 33, but there is no verse 33. So I get to chapter 16 and said, and Jesus also said to his disciples, and in my mind I'm thinking, now Jesus, you had a good stopping point earlier and you didn't do it. And now once you reel us in with this older brother thing, you don't finish the story. Did the older son go into the party? We don't know. We do not know how this story ends. Why did Jesus not finish the story? Well, I think he left the ending of this parable so that everyone listening to him that day and this day could write their own conclusion. Now, Luke is the only gospel writer to record this parable. What does Luke have in mind for us? Why did he include this story? What lessons can we learn? I think there are several. One message I think Luke wanted to highlight is the call to follow Jesus is a call to love those others condemn and shun, and to help those who need a fresh start. Let me say that again. The call to follow Jesus is a call to love those others condemn and shun, and to help those who need a fresh start. This is not easy. Our tendency is to be judgmental and skeptical and maybe even jealous. But as followers of Jesus, we should adopt the attitude of the Father in this story, because we have been called to make hope visible to those who are living in despair. And listen, now this is tough, but this is true. It makes no difference if they created the mess they are living in by making bad decisions and being irresponsible. Let me say that again. I want it to sink in. It makes no difference if they are in a mess of their own making or not. That doesn't matter. When they come to their senses, when they reach out for help, we must provide for them a safe place to fall and a hopeful place to recover. One thing you will learn: pure grace makes some people very angry. Pure grace will upset a lot of people. I have watched people being driven back to the far country whose heart was set on coming home. And I think what bothers me the most is the same people who were the hardest on others. When they made mistakes, they didn't have a problem receiving unconditional love. The gospel of Jesus Christ does not merely call us to trade love with those who live up to their potential and those who are mature. The gospel of Jesus Christ does not call us to merely trade love with people who are kind and respectful and industrious and ambitious and good to us. No, the gospel demands that we give love to those who have done nothing to deserve it. We do not extend grace because of who they are. We extend grace for two reasons: who we are and whose we are. Mercy and grace are the bedrock of our faith, because every one of us are sinners. And to not show someone the love and the grace and the mercy that God shows us is the height of hypocrisy. We are all capable of making bad choices. We are all capable of hurting those we love most. And every one of us have been known to sabotage our relationships with foul language or a critical spirit, a negative attitude, and sometimes even abusive behaviors. And to ignore our blind spots and to spike in attitude when someone comes crawling home for help, that's unacceptable. That is unacceptable if you want to call yourself a follower of Jesus Christ. That is the time when you walk alongside them, not when you turn away from them. How do you do it, though? How do you do it? Well, you have to rise above your feelings, and you have to take the high road. Sometimes you have to love people at their worst to bring out their best. No one ever said love was easy, especially not Jesus. Love will demand the deepest and the most challenging sacrifices from you and from me, and it will require we do the difficult, most challenging thing: And when we don't do it, we're not following Jesus. You see, the reason the older brother did not welcome the younger brother home was because he didn't love the brother the same way the father did. The brother's attention was on himself. The father's attention was on his son. The brother's initial reaction was to punish the prodigal. The father's was to let the prodigal know he was still of great value. The elder brother was focused on the past. The father was focused on the future. It was time to chart a new course. It was time to begin again. It was time to pick up the pieces, to reconstruct a better life. It was time to understand the power of love and what grace can do if you'll just give it a chance. It was time to let a lonely, scared, and humiliated boy know the long nightmare that he had created was over. And what better way to do it than with a welcoming and affirming bear hug? When I picture that scene, I picture the father running. And I picture the father picking up that boy and picking him up off of the ground even. And just going around in circles, embracing his son. Who needs you to give them a hug today? Who needs you to give them a hug? A Spanish story says that a father and son became estranged. The son ran away and the father had no idea where to look for him. After months with no communication, the father put an ad in a Madrid newspaper. The ad read this: "Son, meet me in front of the newspaper office on Saturday at noon. All is forgiven. I love you, your father." Noon Saturday came. And the story says over 800 boys came to that newspaper office, hoping it was their father who wanted them to come home. Who needs you to love them that much? Who needs you to be that kind of a parent, to be that kind of a friend, to be that kind of a family member? Or on the other hand, who needs you to come to your senses? Who needs you to own up to your decisions and quit blaming others for where you are? Who needs you to be honest and humble and repentant? Don't let pride keep you where you are if where you are is not where you need to be. Let me say that again. Don't let pride keep you where you are if where you are is not where you need to be. Ask God to help you take the first step in the right direction. And if you will, you'll find that when you make the second step, and the third step, and the fourth step, and so on, that God will be right beside you, that God will never leave you, and that the love of the Father is as strong as it ever was. God help us to model that love to a hurting world.